Hi everybody, meteorologist Joe Cioffi. It is a Friday, amen, September the 7th, 2018. We are at 5 minutes after 7 Eastern Time. We have a whole lot to cover here on this live stream tonight. We have Florence. We have two new tropical depressions. We have the remnants of Gordon going to bring heavy rains to the Ohio Valley, and it already is in some places. We have the general weekend weather that's going on in the United States. So I timed the live stream tonight for after 7, so this way, if I go long, it's not a big deal. I have plenty of time. So welcome aboard to everybody. I see a few new folks on the chat board. So I think what I'm going to do is, so I don't overload my computer with everything on the, to setting everything up, we're going to go through Florence at first thing. And then when we're done with that, I'm going to come back to you guys and go through the chat and see your questions. And this way, we'll get those answers covered. And then we'll jump to the next, the two tropical depressions. And then we'll go on to Gordon and the local weather that's happening. So I think that'll work. Just a quick reminder from the very top. We just want to tell you, for those of you who are watching along the East Coast, because it is being talked about, please bear in mind that you should consult, if it should come to pass, you should consult your local National Weather Service office or the National Hurricane Center. The Weather Service website is weather.gov. The Hurricane Center's website is nhc.noaa.gov. Regarding decisions you may have to make if there's a threat from a tropical storm or a hurricane. Weather model maps that we show you here, which are courtesy of tropicaltidbits.com. Those are not to be used for decision making, nor should you use any of the spaghetti plot maps that we might show you that have the hurricane tracking models. I will show you the official National Hurricane Center forecast, and that is something that you should take a look at. That is fine. The rest of it you got to be really careful with. So again, nhc.noaa.gov and weather.gov, and your local officials, your go-to sources. Okay, so why don't we get started here? I know that Johnny Quest has to have at least another 3 inches of rain, and unfortunately you're going to get more Johnny Quest with this warm front that's setting up and the remnants of Gordon that are coming into play. A couple of things that have occurred today. Some of you may already know. Some may be hearing this for the first time. You know, we've been watching events transpire with respect to the weather models, and we've been emphasizing the fact that there have been two hurdles essentially for Florence to get through. And the first hurdle was the wind shear, the strong upper air winds that took it from a Category 4 hurricane down to a tropical storm. After our live stream was done last night, it was downgraded to a tropical storm. The shear continued into this morning. Top winds went from 130 to 65 miles an hour in a little over 24 hours. I mean, that's how strong the wind shear was. And yet, Florence was rather resilient in that, in spite of the shear, the inner core of the storm really didn't take much of a hit. And that's important because the wind shear is going to relax. We're already seeing signs of that on satellite loops, and we'll get to that now. We'll punch up first. We're going to go with a wide satellite loop so you can see how busy everything is in the tropical Atlantic. Just think back to a couple of weeks ago, okay, when it was just so darn quiet. And you've got 3 spinning systems. And actually, the Hurricane Center is also talking about the clouds that are off the North Carolina coast as an area of disturbed weather, not forecast to develop, by the way. But if it does, it would be very, very slow to occur. And it is going to eventually just get carried away to the northeast. I don't see anything on the weather models that reflects any kind of surface low that's going to develop there. So that is That's important because if something were to develop, it could have an impact on the track of Florence, which is the next feature that you see when you when you look over just to the right, northeast of the Leeward Islands, and it is getting a bit better organized this evening. The shear has decreased. To the southeast of that, we have a new tropical depression, Tropical Depression 9, and to the east of that, we have Tropical Depression 8, which was formerly potential Tropical Cyclone 8. Both of those very large circulations, particularly the one that is furthest to the east, that is off the African coast, and they have tropical storm warnings up for the Cabo Verde Islands, and that one may wind up becoming a tropical storm before the one ahead of it. So the next name is Helene, and I believe the name after that is Isaac. So I'm going to, let me just get rid of this. We're going to get rid of that, and then we'll go to the next loop. And this is the tighter view here of Florence. And unlike yesterday where it was starting to, it was getting that disheveled look because of the wind shear, you're seeing here tonight the convection is actually becoming a bit more symmetrical. There's still some shear issues going on. In fact, I'm going to switch off real quick, and we'll bring up another satellite loop here. I'm going to go to the Tropical Tipid satellite imagery, and you can see he's got all the storms here, which is great. You can look at every single system that's out there. So I'm going to go to the infrared. Let's see how this looks. This is a different way of looking at it. It's all grayed out, but if you look up to the northeast, those clouds that are on the northeast side, that is the result of the wind shear. The cloud tops are being blown away. Let's go to the regular visible IR. And you can see it a bit better here. Just takes a little time for it to load. And there, the cloud tops are being blown away to the northeast, but it's a bit less than yesterday. So the shear seems to have peaked and starting to decrease, and we are seeing bursts of convection in and around the circulation center. So I think that Florence is getting ready, and the Hurricane Center did indicate in its advisory that it is probably getting ready to resume strengthening, and it may wind up becoming a hurricane again sometime during Saturday, perhaps. Maybe not till Saturday night or early Sunday, but it's going to get there eventually. And it is now at 52 degrees west. The ocean water temperatures, especially once you get past 55 west and 60 west, are very, very warm, particularly between the Leeward Islands and Bermuda. And that is going to be supportive, I believe, to getting this at least back to a Category 3 hurricane. And possibly we could wind up with something a bit more than that. Now, where is this all going? Well, we're going to switch now. I'll go to the wide view of the GFS model this afternoon, and this is what the surface map is supposed to look like this evening. I'm just going to really quick though. I just want to make sure you guys are all okay and you can hear me fine, and there is, you got on the screen what you should have on the screen. It all looks very good. Okay, so now I'll just come back. We'll come back now. Let me get back to where I was. And, all right, there's the loop. Okay, so there's the GFS. So this is the GFS. Now you'll notice there's 3 lows out here. The lead low is Florence. Then you have Depression 9 and Depression 8. 8 is the one that's closest to the African coast. 9 is the one in the middle. Now, I'm going to go to the upper air. And we talked about the fact that hurdle number 1 was the wind shear. And Florence seems to have passed that test. Now, the second hurdle is going to be the upper trough that moves off the Canadian Maritimes on Sunday. You can see it here. And now, big change from the runs of the last couple of days. If you recall, I can go back to yesterday to show you yesterday. The trough kind of got, tried to extend pretty far to the south, or actually, if I go back to Thursday, I think that might show it a bit better. But the trough was there, extending southward from Greenland south-southwestward into the North Atlantic. And there was still some question, even though most models did not recurve it, there was some question. But the trough is less defined at this point, and more importantly, the ridge in between is stronger. This is one big correction that models have had to make over the last month or so. When it's come to the strength of these upper highs, they have wound up being much stronger, and in this case, it is critical to the final path of Florence. Now, that ridge is going to build off the east coast and then build northwestward into New England and into western New York. You can see it there. It's punching westward. So as Florence is moving west-northwestward or northwestward, the ridge is also building back westward at the same time. You notice where all the lines are tightly packed in the northern plains and across southern Canada. From there north and west, that's where you have the strong Canadian jet and the westerlies that would move everything from west to east. They are clearly displaced well to the north, and there's nothing there that suggests, or even remotely suggests, that something could come down and perhaps erode that ridge. It's the strength of the ridge that has been key to this all along, and the GFS, which is actually probably still remains the furthest east of all the models, has come back southwestward today, and it has gotten much closer now to the Europeans' view of things, and we'll look at that as well. But this is from the 18Z run, which brings it inland south of Hatteras on the Outer Banks, then up into eastern Virginia, and then kind of sits it there over Delaware Bay as it gradually weakens, and then moves on off the coast of New Jersey. Now, this would be, at least for my neck of the woods, primarily a rain event with some wind, but not a whole lot of wind, and there would be probably some tidal issues, but I don't think it would be anything to be concerned about. I think the takeaway today is, if all comes to pass according to the pictures that are being painted, that the threat is not eliminated for coastal, say coastal southern New England and down through New Jersey and into Delaware and the Delmarva Peninsula. The threat is not eliminated. I want to make that clear. But I think that the threat, the area that should be a little more concerned at this point would be from coastal Virginia southward, and I'm kind of leaning to the more southern track, because we keep seeing these models adjusting west and south, and if this ridge is what it seems to be, a bit of a powerhouse, we may have to adjust a little bit further to the south. Now, here's the European, which actually has an even stronger upper high that builds off the east coast. This is Tuesday night. That's a very strong upper high that's building. Same thing, it ridges back, but the GFS wanted to kind of build the ridge back more up toward western New York and western PA. The European has the arm axis on the ridge kind of building more westward into West Virginia and Ohio, so that keeps it. Well, this is the GFS. I'm sorry. Let me just go to the European. There you go. So here's the European. I knew something was wrong there, but there you see how the axis of the ridge on the European is more east-west, as the GFS was more southeast-northwest. So with more of that east-west axis, more of that ridge pushing in, it wants to take Florence on keep it on a more westerly track for a longer period of time, which would move the threat level a bit further south. The European would suggest that it might be more coastal South Carolina. Again, we are just, we're talking theoretically here with respect to the forecast, folks. If you're watching, I'm not forecasting anything at this point. I'm just trying to show you what's going on in the upper atmosphere. Remember, it's all these gears that are working together. If I go back from a couple of days ago and you watch the motion going along, you can see how all the chess pieces, as I often like to refer to them, they move around, they change. Some new ones form, old ones disappear, and all these other systems are going to have impact on the track. But the European suggests that the ridge is going to be even stronger. Now, what could change in this is the fact that, well, maybe the ridge is overdone. There are instances where that's happened. But the thing is, past performance suggests of the last month and a half, and particularly the last couple of weeks, where these ridges have been stronger than modeled. And you kind of have to go along with that idea until proven otherwise. So, if I had to lean in any direction, I would probably want to favor more the Europeans' idea in terms of where the ultimate destination is. But they all have the important takeaway here, I think, is the fact that they all pretty much have it going to the same place, or roughly the same place. Granted, I'm talking about a large stretch of miles here for the coastline, but they're coming closer and closer together. And the other difference would be that the European, kind of takes it northwestward. If Johnny Quest, you may not like this, because if this is correct, you're going to wind up taking the remnant circulation into the mountains of Western Virginia and West Virginia, and this could, if this worked out, this could be a very serious rain event for that particular area, and that's an area that doesn't need any more water. It's got plenty. I'm now going to switch around to the Canadian, and I'll show you the surface. I'm showing you the upper air, which is a bit of a smoother look than you look at the surface. But the Canadian, same thing. Ridge is stronger and further south, and it wants to deflect it westward into Savannah, for God's sake, because it tries to build this upper high across the top. The ridge is the key. Oftentimes when we deal with these tropical systems, we are looking at the troughs being the keys, and in this particular instance, it's the ridge that is the big player, the upper high. Now, on we go. I'll go back to the surface map since we're on the Canadian. You can see the Canadian's view of this. And there are your other two systems, by the way, moving across the tropical Atlantic. Here's the representation of Florence moving, northeast of the Bahamas, and then moving northwest and then turning westward at the last minute as that high builds to the north. The GFS, both the 12Z and the 18Z actually were not that different, but for the same time frame, the GFS has the low moving northeastward and into over Delaware Bay. So landfall actually occurs faster on the GFS, and here it is on the GFS approaching the southeast coast and then moving in. And this is Thursday, during the day Thursday. Actually, it would be early Thursday morning that the storm would approach, and then you see how it kind of hangs around the coast. Take the GFS track and just move it down by 150 miles or so, and you have the Europeans track, which I can't show you the same map for that because they don't have a surface with precip. So I'll have to go to the pressures, and in fact we could take a tighter view. Okay, let's go to this. This is what'll work better. So going into, this is Tuesday morning. Now we're at Wednesday morning. Thursday morning making its approach. For the European, it's South Carolina. And then it goes inland, and then you see how it just kind of moves up. Let me back it up here. So it goes inland. This is Friday. This is Saturday. Sunday. So it actually stalls it there because it has to wait for a trough from the west now to come in. The ridge is beginning to break down, but it hasn't broken down enough to keep things moving, and it's waiting for the next trough to come in from the west to pick it up and finally getting it moving again. So, the European model certainly would be a big concern for the mountains of Virginia and West Virginia and Western North Carolina, Eastern Kentucky, that whole region in there, because that could be mean flooding rains if this materializes, and we don't know yet. If this is the final outcome, okay, so that's another possibility I think that needs to be considered. But all in all, the takeaway, as I said, with all of this is the fact that The models seem to be coming together with respect to this. I'll bring up the Hurricane Center's forecast. I like their interactive map, personally, so I can get actually pretty tight on this. And there's Florence, and now this is at 120 hours, which I believe is Wednesday. This is 8 p.m. Tuesday. I'm sorry, 8 p.m. Tuesday, off the North Carolina, South Carolina coast, and still heading to the northwest as a major hurricane. So this is the official National Hurricane Center forecast. That's what it looks like on the tighter view. Notice it passes well north of the leewards, well north of Puerto Rico and Cuba. All of these coastal waters are going to get ripped up with big waves, and it's forecast to become, the Hurricane Center has it becoming a major hurricane by 8 o'clock Monday evening. Past performance would suggest if the conditions are ripe for strengthening, and they actually are rather favorable for quick strengthening when it goes west of 60 west, you could wind up getting this to be a major hurricane faster than modeled. That might be another critical thing to remember, because if it does strengthen to a major hurricane faster, becomes a more intense cyclone, you'll have to go higher up in the atmosphere to look for the steering. That might try to turn it more poleward. This is one of the reasons why we can't really completely rule out areas up as you go further north, because there is that possibility, and the possibility that the upper ridge could wind up eroding. So still a lot of questions. I would say, I would, as the Hurricane Center suggested, at least for the East Coast, might not be a bad idea right now to just kind of take stock of your stuff and just make sure you've got, your the things that you might need in order, just in case, your hurricane plan, that kind of thing. They've suggested that on their advisory, and it makes sense. That's just common sense. Okay, here are the hurricane tracking models. We are seeing them. They're getting. Notice that, by the way, over the last couple of days, we had a few of them going in a couple of different directions. They're starting to get closer and closer. There's a bunch of them that are tightly clustered. That gives an increasing amount of confidence when you see that. And there's been a shift from the prior run further south and west. So that's important. Also shifting to the south and west is when we look at the GFS it's the Canadians, the GFS ensembles, which also, while they still have some that turn it northward east of the Carolinas, all of the landfalls are basically from southern New Jersey, but the concentration of them in eastern North Carolina. But bear in mind, with the ensembles of the GFS, all the different members in the GFS group, that the resolution of a lot of the members is not as good as the operational GFS, which is the one I showed you. So they might be missing out on the strength of the upper high, and that could be the reason why you see some of the members turn it eastward. So you have to. I'm not a huge fan of the ensembles, because basically it just gives you 22 more models to look at, and I don't see the point. I'd rather just work with the one model, the standard operational model run, and not deal with all these extra ones, because all it does is just, I don't know. I just think it makes more confusion. It's a perfect example of too much information, essentially. So that pretty much, as far as Florence is concerned, I think that pretty much covers it. There isn't a whole lot more I think I can add to it at this stage, because now we're still, now we've got to wait. It still hasn't gotten to 60 degrees west. There is a long climatology record that suggests that storms in this position up until now have never hit the East Coast or made a direct hit to the East Coast. So this could be the first time that a storm coming from the place where Florence did, north of 20 degrees north and west of 50 degrees west, there's a relatively long list. Anthony Orr points out that there's 33 storms in total, but I think it's 8 hurricanes since 1951 that have been in this region, and none of them have made it to the U.S. East Coast. So this could be a first time event for something like this. But we do have it is corresponding with a rather odd, to some extent, a rather odd upper air scenario across the Atlantic. You basically have all the different puzzle pieces that you would need to have in place in order to drive a storm westward from this spot. That doesn't come together. Maybe sometimes you see some of those pieces there, but rarely would you see all of them in order to have this happen, or at least that's what's forecast to happen. So I'm going to come to the chat board now. I'm going to go through some of your questions. Mirtha Gunter, are the upper ridges pushing Florence more south? Actually, the ridges, it's a combination, Mirtha, of the ridge and the sheared nature of the tropical storm, because while it's been in its weaker state, the circulation doesn't extend that far up into the atmosphere, so it's responding more to the low-level steering, which is generally west or even south of due west. The Hurricane Center pointing out that it's been actually tracking a little south of due west. And if it were, when it was more intense 2 days ago, right before the shearing got underway, we even noticed it here on, I believe it was Wednesday night. It looked like it was moving northwest before the shear began. So the shearing experience weakening this storm, I think, was extremely important for the outcome, for the longer term outcome, because that is now preventing the storm. It's interacting with this ridge now in a weaker state, moving westward, and it's preventing the storm from gaining latitude. In other words, moving further north and going poleward. So this was kind of critical that it weakened in terms of where it was going to wind up. And now, of course, we're going to wait and see with that second hurdle, which we think it's going to also easily pass over, and that is that trough that's going to be out in the Atlantic on Sunday. That trough will not extend far enough south to cause it to recurve. Just about every model that's out there it has no recurvature. So, but I still want to kind of keep that door open. I've seen stranger things happen sometimes when it comes to tropical systems. Let's see. Just want to make sure I don't miss anything. Is there a chance of smoking shoot-a-packs? Is there a chance that Florida could get hit by Florence? I think there's a possibility that you could see the track shift even further south than where it is now. I think that's possible. I want to see if that shifting west and south, is it done? And it may not be. If the ridge is super strong, it might shift a bit further south. The Canadian model seems to have the southernmost extreme, trying to bring it into coastal Georgia. Coastal East Coast Florida. When you're saying bring it into Florida, are you talking anywhere from Jacksonville down to Miami? I would think. Look, I think the odds of it shifting that far south and west are pretty low at this point. But it still could wind up adjusting. Also, by the way, we have to bear in mind too, getting closer and closer now. We're into this now and into the day 5, day 6 time frame. So if we're going to see the models correct, we're likely to see them correct in smaller and smaller increments. So I don't know if you could get a shift big enough to move it that far to the south. Michael, whoops. I lost you. I'm sorry. Hang on a second. Let's see. Oh, Magnetic Perturbation, thanks for hitting Super Chat tonight. I don't do corporate media anymore. I prefer to get my news, weather, and sports and entertainment from independent sources. Thank you very much. Very kind of you to say. I really appreciate it. Thank you. That'll be either coffee or a cigar, depending on what my mood is. I just saw a question. I'm sorry. I have fat fingers sometimes with this. I hope I get it back. I know your name was Michael. I'm trying to find you. Let's see. Okay, Ryan Ford. If the models flip back north again, you really have to wonder how reliable they actually are. I don't think this is a case of flipping. I think what we're seeing the different features in the upper atmosphere that are kind of flexing their muscles, and could they flex them more or flex them less on future runs? Sure. I think we're at a point now. We had big adjustments on the GFS. My memory was jarred the other day going to last year. I remembered about with Hurricane Irma as we watched it in the long range, where initially it took it, I think, to Greenland, and then it had a landfall in Newfoundland, and then it was Nova Scotia, then it was Boston, then it was New York City, then it was Delaware Bay and Chesapeake Bay, and on it went further and further south until ultimately it wound up moving south of the Florida Keys through the Florida Straits. So those to me that looks more like flips than anything else, because when you're in the long range, you get situations where on one run you have a trough, and then on the next run in the same place for the same time you have a ridge. In other words, one run you have a low there, the next run you have a high there, and vice versa. Whereas here, we know where all the pieces are going to be. They are going to be where the models say they're going to be for the most part. It's a matter of, are they right in the strength of them? Is the high not strong enough on the GFS? Is the European right with the stronger ridge, or is the GFS right with the slightly weaker ridge? Because that could make the difference between a landfall, say, from Delaware Bay or Chesapeake Bay on the one hand to the Carolinas. So I think we're in that process now where we're kind of narrowing things down. Michael M., the Weather Channel said the aircraft flying into the storm on Sunday instead of Monday. There is a NOAA craft. Actually, I thought I read that it was going to be on Saturday, but they're sending out they are going to send out an experimental flight of some kind. I think they said they're going to do it tomorrow to gather the data. So that'd be great if they've got some recon data. That will certainly help out in trying to figure out what these models are going to do. Joyce Mack, do you have any gut feelings about where Florence will go? Okay. Look, if I had to lean in a particular direction, I'm kind of thinking. I'm kind of thinking somewhere along the southeast coast. I want to, we're more than 5 days ahead. I'm kind of thinking this is a good point. I'm just sort of broad brush it. If I had to guess, I think that's the area that has the larger threat. Okay, so at least from what we're seeing right now. And the other question is, I think, well, what exactly are we going to be dealing with in terms of a hurricane when it approaches? Is it going to be a major storm? Is it going to be a major hurricane? Is it going to be something a bit less than that? I would, as far as the strength is concerned, certainly everything suggests that it could be a major hurricane. But I want to wait and see what happens in the next 2 days as it gets out of this area of shear and starts to strengthen. I want to take a look at how fast it strengthens. Sometimes when you get these sheared systems, there are many instances where they never get quite back to the way they once were for one reason or another. There are other instances where it's made no difference. So I want to see how it behaves in the next 48 to 72 hours, and I think then we could probably evaluate better what we're going to have in terms of strength as it approaches the coast. And we got a nice crowd tonight. Welcome to those of you who are watching. Welcome aboard, and thank you for being here, by the way. I hope you like what you see, and you subscribe to my YouTube channel, which is absolutely free. Maybe I'll just mention that this might be a good time. I have my websites, meteorologistjoecioffi.com, and an offshoot of that is nycweathernow.com, which my friend Ben Scott has. But you could also, I have a site on Patreon. where I not only have website posts, but I also put up additional posts, and I actually have done some private live streams for Patreon members. You can join for as little as $2 a month, and I also will have a new app coming out, a free app that's going to be coming out hopefully in the next couple of weeks. I was kind of wishing I had it by now, but we're still in the process of putting that together. I put the link up for those of you who are interested to Patreon. There's one on the descriptor to this video and to this live stream, and I just threw it in there on the chat board. So Evan Dees, as I said, the category of a storm when it hits the East Coast at this time. Hold that question till maybe Sunday, and let's see what we have Sunday and what the upper air looks like heading toward the coast. Certainly, the conditions look like this thing should be able to strengthen back to a major hurricane. That is what the Hurricane Center, by the way, is forecasting. I don't have, I can't really disagree with that particular assessment. Thank you, Magnetic Perturbation. Thank you again for the kind words. The heat has broken in the Northeast. Does that have an effect? Asks Earthen Vessels. Well, that is the cold front that has moved on through. That actually is one of the players here because it's the upper trough that's going to be swinging eastward, and on that front's going to back up as a warm front with the remnants of Gordon. And yeah, it is going to have some impact. What will happen is that front comes back northward early next week. So by Tuesday, we're going to go back to we're not going to go back to oppressive heat, I don't believe, but we're going to go to very warm and humid conditions starting on Tuesday. That's going to basically saturate the eastern part of the United States inside a tropical air mass. And then you're going to have Florence playing into this. David Schwartz. Well, before that, Frank DiNardo, Jersey Shore, Philadelphia. Right now, I'm kind of thinking more, south, down to the, I said before, the southeast coast of the United States look to me to be the area that could be more vulnerable in here at this point, but I don't want to take other areas off the table yet. Okay, let's get through the weekend and see, and let's see what happens with this. David Schwartz, TD8 and 9, are they close enough for Fujiwara to happen? Okay, so I guess that's my cue now. We'll go to Tropical Depression 8 and 9. So just give me a second here. And I'm going to bring up the Tropical Atlantic. This is Monday, by the way. And I almost forgot, but I just remembered you need to see the maps. I got to bring the window back up. So hang on a second. Hang on one moment here. Okay, while I set this up, just give me a few seconds. Some of you might see an ad go by. Google likes to do that sort of thing. And then I'll have everything set up and we'll get the map going. So let's, all right, that's not it. Where was I? Okay, so this is the European, by the way, for Monday morning. And there are, at this point, at least from the Europeans' view, it looks like that there are at least 2 hurricanes on here. You have Florence, which is north of the Leeward Islands on this view, and then you have the next 2, Tropical Depression 9, which is the one further west from Tropical Depression 8, which is the one that's west of the Cabo Verde Islands. 8 is the one that on this would probably be a hurricane, and eventually 9 may become a hurricane. But I'm pretty confident you're gonna have these 3 named storms here. I don't think you're going to have Fujiwara for a couple of reasons. We're looking at the upper air. It looks like what's happening is that look to the north of the system that's the furthest to the east. That's where there's the upper high that's got its kind of a finger there that's pointing down into from the Azores. Okay, that ridge actually weakens, and at that point. By the way, these 2 systems here are roughly about 800 miles apart. So they're not as close as they seem, but they're about 800 miles apart. But if the ridge directly to the north of Tropical Depression 8, the one furthest east, breaks down, that starts going northwestward, while Tropical Depression 9, which at this point is a tropical storm and east of the Leeward Islands, has an upper ridge above it that's still strong enough to keep driving it westward. In fact, if you go straight north from 8, this can get confusing. I'm trying to be careful here, but if you go straight north from 8, there's actually a trough that is developing in the central Atlantic, and that winds up pulling this hurricane northward, or northwestward anyway, into a weakness. The system that Tropical Depression 9 just continues to march on its merry way westward, and notice you've got this ridge that is in the Atlantic. There's Florence, the one that's furthest to the left, big upper high in the middle, okay? And then you've got the weakness that 8 is responding to by going northwestward and along 40 degrees west, so we're talking way out here. But 9 is directly underneath the ridge, the upper high, and then it actually just keeps it moving westward, crossing the Leeward Islands in about 5, getting close to the Leeward Islands in about 5 days and crossing it in 6 days. This is Thursday morning, according to the European. So if this plays out, we could have something heading for the islands, which is the last thing that they need, considering the kind of year that they had last year. I'm going to see if I have to change maps. I may have to. Okay, yes, I'm going to have to change maps here. So I'll get the Hurricane Center's forecast. We'll go to Tropical Depression 9, and I'll bring up this one instead of the interactive. So you can see what the Hurricane Center is doing with this. Brings it to a tropical storm by Sunday morning, strengthens it to a hurricane sometime early Tuesday, and then further west, it's a hurricane. At this point, Wednesday at 2 p.m., it's about 350 miles to the east of the southern leewards. Okay, that is their official forecast. I'm not going to argue with it too much. I didn't give it as deep a look as I did with Florence. This is one of the problems when you have several storms running around, that it's hard to devote the kind of time that you need to. It's quite possible, though, that we could wind up with dealing with two landfalling hurricanes in two different places next week. So the Hurricane Center is going to be, I'm sure they're not looking forward to the possibility that they could wind up being a bit stretched. Here's Tropical Depression 8, which they strengthened to a tropical storm by this evening, by 8 o'clock. We can actually I'll check the advisory in a moment, and that takes it, basically on a west-northwest course, and then kind of starts to bend it back to the northwest. Notice, by the way, that it strengthens it to a hurricane. They indicate that there's a possibility of rapid strengthening here, and then they weaken it a little bit at the end, citing the fact that there could be some wind shear issues as it starts to interact a bit with that trough to the north, and also the fact that there might be some colder water in play in that area. Some of that water may have been upwelled by Florence, so there might be some colder ocean water issues with respect to that. Tropical Depression 9 will not have that issue, by the way, because it's going to be traveling over waters that Florence didn't touch. So that it's going to have, especially once it gets west of 45 west, it's going to have some pretty juicy water to work with. Although some could argue, and I think there's merit. The ocean water obviously is important, but I don't think it's the most important factor when it comes to all this, because if it were, then what we were talking about with respect to storms having a subpar tropical Atlantic season would be, we wouldn't be seeing these storms, or if we did, we'd see them in much weaker, very weak states because of colder than average ocean water temperature. Apparently, that's not having a whole lot of impact. Ocean water temperatures there have actually warmed up to being only near or a little bit below average. So that I think it speaks when you look at the satellite and you see everything spinning, I think the upper aerodynamics probably are a bit more important through all of this. Now, let's come back home. I'm going to shrink myself down a little bit. I want to bring up, we're going to start with WPC. And by the way, I don't know if we can see it here, but let me see if we got it on this shot. We should have it on this shot. We might have a really unusual occurrence here. This is the Pacific satellite. This hurricane, actually Norman, is northeast of Hawaii right now and moving away and weakening. But the hurricane that's in almost the middle of the picture there is Hurricane Olivia. And it is forecast to actually come in to Hawaii from the northeast. That would be highly unusual. It's looking to track westward just south of 20 degrees north. And according to what models are showing and the Hurricane Center's forecast, they're actually bringing it into the Hawaiian Islands from the northeast as a tropical storm. They do weaken it by the time it gets there. But I really didn't give it, I didn't have enough time to really look at it too deep, but I just wanted to bring that up because, I thought it was pretty interesting. Meanwhile, the Weather Prediction Center, I've liked using their 7-day rainfall prediction maps because they have done a very good job as a whole. I don't know whether this map, their forecast, takes into account whatever they think as far as the rainfalls from Florence, whether they have it on land. This would carry us through Friday, so it would include it into some fashion. But I think you're going to have to probably up amounts in some of these areas if we do wind up with a landfall in the Carolinas, and depending on what it does when it goes inland. At this point, probably just go with just looking at what they have. The bottom line is that they do show a substantial amount of rain on the order of 5 inches or more across much of Virginia, North Carolina, back through western Pennsylvania, Ohio, and Indiana, down into West Virginia, that whole area. And I'm guessing that some of that rain is going to be from what's happening this weekend, but the bulk of it may be coming, the areas to the east anyway, the bulk of it would be coming from Florence. I'm guessing they included some of that in their forecast. And then you see how it extends back through Indiana and Illinois. That is being produced by the remnants of Gordon, which we can take a look at. And we see if I can get this satellite, if it behaves itself. I've got the eastern view here. And you can see all the clouds that are now moving through the northeast. This is that frontal boundary that has moved through. Also, the disturbed weather that's off the Carolinas and extends out eastward. And if you looked at the Hurricane Center's tropical weather outlook, they did put a yellow X for that. And as I mentioned earlier, they're not expecting it. They only rated a 20% chance of development in the next 5 days. But got to watch just in case, because if something were to come out of there, it could have impact on Florence. But you can see some of the clouds moving into the Midwest. I'm going to try to get a better shot here. Let's see if I can do that. Give me a second, and I'm going to bring this map back up. Let's take a look at it. I'll punch up the radar. Okay, let's bring this down. Bring that across. All right, so there's your radar, which is pretty loaded tonight. Throughout the parts of the Ohio Valley and south of Chicago. Let me get rid of all these other things so that you can see it. That would be a good thing. Whoops. There you go. So there's your radar tonight. The remnants of Gordon have kind of gotten involved with this developing low, non-tropical low that's going to be coming out of the southwest and moving its way northeastward. So all this rain is going to have to play itself through. Raining quite hard in some places across Missouri, Illinois, Indiana, into parts of western Ohio. Some heavier rains down in southern Indiana, kind of a bit of a gap in between. It has that look of a warm front, of a warm front, cold front type of thing, and overrunning rain. And you have a big high that's building down from the north that is going to be aiding this. And we'll go to the surface map of the Northeast and take a look at what's going to be happening here. I have to tell you quite honestly, even though the dew points really didn't drop very much today in my way, I mean, they did ease. The temperatures eased more so. It didn't get out of the low. Some places didn't get out of the low and mid 70s. I was thrilled with that. It felt so much better just from that standpoint. But here's the GFS for tonight, and you can see all the overrunning lower pressures that extend down into northeast Texas, and from there you have a low that's going to form on Saturday in central Missouri, with some heavy rains being indicated there in the yellow and red. That east-west band, where that is the northern, the rain being produced by the frontal boundary. Now the high is going to try to press southward through New England, and that's going to at least try to push some drier air initially into southern New England and maybe down to about Saturday night into Sunday morning. The GFS might be a bit overdone with this, but it does kind of bring that rain back during the day. Sunday seems like it wants to bring it back a bit faster, and then that low goes into Ohio Monday morning. The warm front is still not through. See how all the isobars are just all tightly together? You got the high sitting northeast of Maine and New Brunswick pressing down. There might be a little bit on the breezy side here Sunday night and Monday with some of this rain, and temperatures on Sunday probably not much out of the low and mid 60s for highs, and I'm going to love that. Now, the warm front eventually does get by later on Monday. By Monday evening, it pushes north of New York City. The upper high is beginning to build at this point. So the cold front that would normally follow is actually going to be falling apart. And you're basically going to just kind of merge the higher pressures coming in from off the Atlantic. You can see the higher pressures here that are offshore. Here we have on the GFS, that of course being Florence. If you want to, the center on the GFS looks like it's roughly at about 26.5 and 65.2 at this point. And now, of course, you have this upper high building into the east, and there is the GFS from this afternoon. This is 2 p.m. Thursday that it brings it to the Outer Banks of North Carolina and then just inland in eastern North Carolina. We don't know that this is going to be the case, folks. This is the model's viewpoint, and I'll looking back up to prior runs, and if it lets me, let's see, it's not letting me for some reason, so I'll have to do it manually. So here is the run from last night, actually from this afternoon, earlier this afternoon. Actually, it's not that different. It's close to being in the same spot. Then we have last night's, which for the same time frame had it in northeastern North Carolina. Then we go back. Let's go back to yesterday eve. This is 0Z, the 0Z run. So that was the run that started Thursday night. Look at the shift from last night to today. I mean, just way south and west. So it joined the party of the other models. I'll even go back. Let's go back to Thursday. We'll go back. This is where it had it east of the New Jersey coast. If we go back to Wednesday, back down. You see how the jumping around, the further out we go, and looking at earlier model runs from earlier this week and before, how this all jumps around for the same time frame. Another 24 hours. Look at this. This is the same time frame for the map you just saw, and it's out well east of the New Jersey coast. This is where the model was keying on the idea of it recurving. And also notice, by the way, there's a tropical storm in the Gulf of Mexico was being indicated for next Thursday, and on that particular run. I don't think it's on the new one. No, we don't see anything there to speak of. But I don't know if this is. Yeah, there's nothing there to speak of here on the new run. So you see how when you go out further in time, you get the big differences that occur. And the European, be interesting. We'll look at the European. I'm going to I'll bring up the map that's easier to look at. Okay, so this was the European today. Okay, I'm going to jump back to yesterday. It was northeast of there, so there's a substantial move southwestward from the run from yesterday. The run from the day before, you notice that now now we went from Thursday's run to Wednesday's run. It's basically just kind of adjusted it southwest, almost by the same distance every 24 hours. Before that, 12Z Tuesday, can't even find it. Where is it? That's it, way over there. It really didn't have much of a clue. 12Z Monday, just for laughs. There it is, 12Z Monday. It had it off the Florida coast. Why did it do that on Tuesday? Let me make sure I was looking at the right thing. Okay, I'm punching up too many maps. Yeah, for some reason, 12Z Tuesday, it barely had it way to the east of where it was. Maybe it had it slower. I can't remember now. After a while, all this stuff does become rather jumbled. But I think I just want to illustrate, what happens when you look at these models, because if you're not following it day to day, you may not be aware of the wide flipping that occurs in the long range, mainly because of the fact that on one run it'll have a high, and on the next run in the same place it'll have a low. It'll have a ridge where there's a trough, or a trough where there's a ridge. You get the idea. Okay, so I'm going to come back to you guys on the board. Give me 1 second here. I'm going to take a swig of water because I am very thirsty. And we are coming up now on, or after 8 o'clock. Wow. Okay. All right, Patricia Jackson lives in Florence, South Carolina. So, that'd be, Florence moves over Florence, I suppose. Let's see. Lightningdale 8, Category 5 Florence. By the way, first of all, we don't know that Category 5. There's nothing right now that would indicate that you should put that in a forecast. Okay, I guess that's the best way to put it. Let the strengthening come on its own. You're not going to win contests and be a hero. I'm just saying. I'm not directing this at you. I'm just saying in general. You get no lauds by predicting a Category 5 hurricane and having it happen. Okay, so if it winds up strengthening and gets very, very strong, we'll let it do it on its own. I think it's going to go back to being a major hurricane, and we'll leave it at that. Unusual tracking storms in the Atlantic and the Pacific. Green Fire 939. Well, we did mention yesterday, this is one of those times where we seem to have it being very busy on both coasts, and I think that one of the reasons that could be is because the Atlantic had to get busy at some point or another. We got rid of the Saharan dust. We got that issue, the issue of drier air coming down and affecting the tropical Atlantic, as the Atlantic pretty much saturated during the end of August and the beginning of September, which just basically opened the door to all this development. But since we don't have a raging El Nino going on, I think this is one of those times during the peak of the season where you can actually see activity. But most of the Pacific activity that's developed actually hasn't developed that close to the coast of Mexico. They've been developing further out. So that could be the takeaway, in that the storms are forming further west on the Pacific side and not so much near the East Coast. And maybe that's one of the reasons why the Atlantic is not seeing an impact from the active Pacific. The storms, the way the upper air is set up, the upper air winds have relaxed across much of the tropical Atlantic, and except for the shear that Florence ran into, they're right now wind shear across the tropical Atlantic is fairly light. Junior Celestin, you're watching from St. Lucia. I will keep you updated on Tropical Depression 9. Absolutely. I'm going to probably have to go into double mode once that becomes a tropical storm, and if it becomes a threat to the islands, for sure. I covered the islands extensively last year when Irma and Maria were going through, so there's no reason for me not to do it for this one. I will take care of it. Let's see. I'm just trying to make sure I get all your questions. Jose briefly hit, we're going back to last year, Jose did briefly hit Category 5 status, as I remember. Okay, it was for a short time, but it did achieve Category 5 status for at least a handful of hours, maybe a little bit more than that, when it was east of the leewards. Okay. I don't, Linda Hernandez, I don't know that your answer to your question. You're asking about evac orders. That's a question that you need to direct to your local officials wherever you happen to live. I don't know how that works where you are. Let's see. If it heads up the coast in New Jersey, will we get rain? Yeah, we'd get rain. It would be a decaying storm. It would depend on how it would move up the coast. If it moved up just inland of the coast, you would wind up with rain and tide, wind and tide issues with that. But it's kind of frustrating to try to speculate. There's so many different things we could speculate on. The movement, the turn northward or northeastward, or does it go into the mountains of West Virginia and Virginia where the rain has been so incredible in some places this summer? That's something I can't gauge that now. I can't even really, I'm not even able to gauge a landfall because there's still a lot we don't know. I think at this point, the best thing to just do at this point, just know it's out there. If you live in those areas, it's out there. Go, just kind of make sure your stuff's in order just in case. And, let's hope that something happens that it becomes less of a threat to everybody. Maybe, something at the last minute. Remember Joaquin, last minute trough, just kind of caught it, and only one model picked up on it and took it out to the northeast, and that was the European, and all the other ones took it northwest, and the European wound up being correct. It's not impossible. Remember, it's unusual to have a storm from this position threaten the east coast of the United States. There hasn't been a single landfall in any of the storms that have been out here since 1851. There have been 8 cases of hurricanes, by the way, so the data set's kind of small. And I would also want to look at the time of year that those storms happen, because this part of the Atlantic usually sees storms later in the season, October and so on, and that's usually a point where you start to get the jet stream dropping further and further south, so it lessens the likelihood of a storm, say, at 25 degrees north. It lessens the possibility of a storm that far north moving westward when it's so far out in the Atlantic. It might move more northwestward or northward or even northeastward. Let's see. All the models have strengths and weaknesses. Absolutely correct, and you have to kind of play your way around them. And Andrea Benz. But you have to look at ocean temperatures because hurricanes love bathwater. Replacement. It's recovering from the shear. The water temperatures between the leewards and Bermuda, and the Hurricane Center discussed this this evening, are exceptionally warm. So that is going to be supportive of a system getting back to major hurricane status as long as the upper air winds are favorable, which they seem to be. And a lot of the intensity models, which don't have kind of mixed results, but a lot of the intensity models are showing this becoming a major hurricane as it gets to about 60 degrees west, which won't be until sometime Sunday night. Okay. I think by Sunday night, Adam, we should probably have a fairly good handle on the threat area, and maybe we can start narrowing things down a little bit, but not until then. I don't think this is two different things, two entirely different events, Sandy and this. The upper airs are completely different, okay? The storm origins completely different, okay? Sandy originated actually from the Caribbean and moved northward out into the Atlantic east of the Bahamas. This one's coming in from the east. Sandy, it was a strong upper air storm in the Ohio and Tennessee Valley that basically pulled it in and wrapped it up and lifted it up north and northwestward around it. This is the opposite. There's a big upper high it's going to be in the eastern part of the United States, and particularly off the Atlantic seaboard, and that is going to drive this northwestward. So there are two totally different scenarios here. I'm just trying to make sure what we got here. D.O. Nankamar, what model is reliable when hurricanes and tropical depressions? The European has, look, no model works all the time, okay? Some get a hot hand and work for a while, and then they stop working. So the European seems to handle these tropical systems better. The thing is, you're not going to know on until hindsight, okay? You can only watch what's happening so far. The Europeans had a pretty good handle on this. I think, but the GFS hasn't been that bad either. But I think the European maybe has had a little bit of a better handle in terms of the track. The GFS seems to have had a little better handle on this in terms of the strength. So sometimes you kind of use the combination of the two. But the European usually handles these tropical systems better. I don't completely know for sure or understand why the models are they use some data that's the same. They might be written, some of the equations that they use in the models they could be written differently. The resolutions might be different. I'm not 100% familiar with that. Michael Marino, Miano. I'm sorry. I thought I saw an R there. What factors would need to change for it to hit Long Island? You need the upper high to be weaker, okay? Especially the northwestern flank of the upper high would need to break down faster than what models are indicating. That would allow this to curve and go further north. That was what the GFS was doing on and off for the last couple of days. But it has been over the last 6 weeks with these upper highs that we wind up seeing them being stronger than modeled, and that would favor the movement more to the west or west-northwest. James CLP, thank you very much for hitting Super Chat tonight. Really, really appreciate it. Thank you. Any chances of the hurricane entering the Gulf? I don't think so. That would be really bizarre if it did. If it wound up being that far south. Okay, I think there'll be some adjustments, further adjustments in the track, but they should get narrower and narrower. Okay. Kevin Hall. So you're on the North Carolina coast. Okay. Here's what I would tell you. I think there's enough evidence to suggest that you need to pay attention, okay? I can't give you a specific answer. The likelihood, I can't give you a yes or no answer or somewhat or whatever. But I think the best answer I can give you is there's enough evidence to suggest that there is a threat to the southeast coast of the U.S., okay? But particularly the Carolinas. I would pay attention. I'm thinking probably Sunday night or Monday, early Monday morning, you probably will have a fairly good handle on what you're going to be dealing with. And, at that point, I think maybe we can make a better assessment. But you certainly should be thinking about it because the Hurricane Center suggests that you do. And I don't think it's a half bad idea just to make sure everything, you got your stuff that you need or whatever it is. I think that's a logical thing at this point. Golden, do I think based off the models that it will make landfall in North Carolina? Yeah, again, just kind of what I said. I can't really give you an answer to that right now. You see what the models are doing, but we don't. We can't. I can't put my finger on it. You're kind of asking me to give you a specific point this early, and I just can't. I can't do that. From what I'm seeing, if you're asking, what I'm seeing, I think the threat area is the East Coast, and I think the threat is probably higher for the Southeast right now. But South and North Carolina, I respect the European. If you want to use the Canadian as the southernmost end, and that says Savannah, and you want to use the GFS as the northern, the easternmost track, and say North Carolina, you can kind of use that as your window. But I don't want to rule out areas to the north of that because I want to wait and see which, the ridge. Is it going to be as strong as the model suggests? Everything suggests that is the case. Okay. Winks Club, salutations from Brevard, Florida, where our government is telling us to get ready for multiple inbound threats. I think, for this to be, nothing's impossible. If that ridge really grows super strong, this could go west for quite a while. So, just bear that in mind. But we're not seeing the evidence of that at the moment. Rafael Hernandez, thank you so much, hitting Super Chat tonight. Thank you. That's a cigar for me tonight. I got coffee and a couple of cigars. I really appreciate it. Applesauce. I don't even know what is EGRI. I don't even know what that is. So if you can clarify that, I would appreciate it. Okay, you know what? Hang on one second. Okay. The rewarding coin, if you're listening to this, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Goodbye. I'm not going to, I'm just not going to tolerate nonsense. Okay, and we'll just leave it at that. Johnny Quest, he's gone. No worries. So anybody else? I know I got some people asking me after yesterday. He's off. Kelvin Carranza, will New York, Long Island get hit or a chance? Right now, as I said, I'm kind of focusing. The threat area would probably, seems to look to be further south at this stage of the game, unless we suddenly see models beginning to shift to the east. And okay, apparently this idiot has multiple IDs. I don't know what's going on. It's kind of sad when you this is what you spend your life doing, but let me just get rid of him again. Okay, so hopefully he's gone now for good. Thank you very much, Lydia McDonald. I appreciate it. I should have gotten rid of him sooner, but I was waiting for him. I warned him at the beginning of the live stream. Okay, enough. He's banned. EGRI is one of the UK Met models. Oh, Applesauce, good. Thanks for bringing that up. The UK Met has been the furthest south of all the models, so it'll be interesting to see if, the UK, I have a fondness for the UK Met model. I wish I could show it to you. I have a fondness for the UK Met model because in the wintertime, there are instances where the UK Met model just really outperforms all the other models. I haven't really worked with it too much on with regards to tropical systems, so I'm not sure how my history of working with the UK Met with tropical systems is extremely limited, so I don't know how it's behaved, but it has been further south of all of them, and I'm going to take a look at it once I'm done with the live stream. I'm going to take a look at the UK Met to see what it does. The icon I didn't look at today, Delvin. You know what happens? There's just so much you can look at. After a while, you start to get tired. So I kind of restrict myself to the GFS and European, sometimes the Canadian. In the wintertime, I'll add the UKMet. Of course, I'll look at the short-range NAM. That's 5 different models to absorb, and all the other things that I got to look at. So I'm going to kind of refrain from looking at the icon in case it decides to do something else. Levy Jerez. Oh, yeah, let me just check to see if the Hurricane Center's done anything. There should be an 8 o'clock advisory. We do not have an upgrade of Tropical Depression 8. Tropical Depression 8 is at 13.3, 19.2. Okay, that's how far east it is. 13.3 north, 19.2 west, moving west at 10, and top winds are 35 miles an hour. The reason why they're under 3-hourly advisories is that we have tropical storm warnings up for some of the Cabo Verde Islands. So whenever there's a tropical storm warning, you go to 3-hour advisory. Okay, I'm sorry, Calvin. You don't need to apologize. Your question was about New York, Long Island, which is still certainly legit. Yeah, we were on 74 minutes. Delvin, I'm not going to make it to 88 minutes. Not this time around. Let's see. What's going on here? Chris Bethune. I always watch the military bases when the planes start bugging out and they're feeling it's a pretty solid threat. By the way, if you go to tropicaltidbits.com and click on Air Force Recon, you can watch the plane graphically and look at each pass and see the what kind of winds it reports and the wind barbs and all the rest of it. It's very useful. It's very, very useful. And when we get the recons with these, when we move into next week, in fact, tomorrow I'll probably hopefully have an opportunity. And I have put them up from time to time, so we'll certainly put them up again. Okay, folks. At this point, just going to call it a night. Before I do, let me just real quick, shameless self-promotion. For those of you who like to have all weather in your lives all the time, this is what my Patreon site looks like. It's meteorologist Joe Cioffi. I'm creating a weather forecasting experience for you. So if you like, you can join up. You'll get all my website posts. It is website posts, videos. Been doing special posts just for Patreon members. And also, I've done some video live streams just for Patreon members. So if you like, just go to the link that's on the descriptor to this video. And they also have an app. If you download the Patreon app, you can have me on your phone, because you can access the Meteorologist Joe Cioffi page from there. It's $2 a month. That helps me with bills. And I am constructing. I'm having another app constructed, and that will be hopefully out. I don't know when. I was hoping I'd have it by now, but these things take a lot of time, and maybe sometime in the next several weeks we can have a beta ready. But I'm not 100% sure on that. I have to check with my buddy who's working on it. So here's the schedule for tonight. If you haven't had enough of a live stream that has gone on for 1 hour and 17 minutes, at 9:15, I will do a live stream with my colleague Joe Rayo, the Joe and Joe Weather Show. And that'll be at 9:15 Eastern Time on Facebook, Meteorologist Joe Cioffi, or on Joe's Facebook page, Joe Rayo Weather. If you miss it, I will upload it later tonight to Patreon and to YouTube. So if you're not on Facebook, you can get it that way. What else? Also, I just have to say real quick, there's I have a link to Amazon on my descriptor to my video as well. We are a participant in the Amazon Services LLC Associates Program, which is an affiliate advertising program designed to provide a means for us to earn some fees by linking to Amazon and affiliated sites. If you shop on Amazon and use that link, you're going to shop there anyway. If you do it through the Joe Stradamus link, you get your stuff. Amazon throws me back some coin out of their pocket, and I get a few cigars out of it and a couple of cups of coffee. Okay, weekend. So I know before Delvin asked, thanks, Scott Briller. I got to your message, by the way, on Patreon. I kind of lost it, and then I found it again. Okay, so as far as the weekend goes, I'm tossing the idea because I got to get some stuff done, and I want to take a breather because Sunday I'm working at WPIX TV in New York, and I'm thinking that I may have to take my laptop with me and do my Sunday live stream from there, unless I do one at midday. But I just wonder whether I might want to wait till the late afternoon. We'll see. But as far as tomorrow is concerned, there's a chance I might do one early because I'm going to go out for a while. And therefore, so I'll do one early in the morning on Saturday, probably before, start at maybe around 8 o'clock. If I'm half awake, I'll do something. And then possibly late in the afternoon, I can get back for a while and do it then. But I don't want to pin myself down to a time because I don't know. And Sunday, we'll definitely get something going. And then, of course, next week, if the threat does materialize, there probably will be multiple live streams going on during the day. So just to give you guys a heads up. Thank you again for everybody being here. Thank you for those of you who hit Super Chat tonight. Magnetic Perturbation, James CLP, and Rafael Hernandez. Thank you so much. Really, really appreciate it. And new users that you're on, remember to subscribe on my YouTube channel. You can subscribe for free, and then you get notifications when live streams go up. And we do live weather here at least once a day. All right, folks, take care. We'll see you tomorrow.